The glass walls of Morgan & Associates reflected everything. Claire Morgan sat at her desk on the 23rd floor staring at spreadsheets that blurred together into meaningless numbers. Outside her window, Boston Harbor stretched gray and cold under a December sky. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't touched it. Through the transparent wall of her office, movement caught her eye. Marcus Reed walked past phone pressed to his ear, his expression calm and professional as always. He was talking to someone about quarterly projections, his voice too low to hear, but his gestures precise and measured. Claire's gaze followed him longer than it should have. 3 years. That was how long Marcus had worked as her chief operating officer. 3 years of perfectly executed strategies, flawlessly organized reports, and a kind of quiet competence that made her job easier in ways she couldn't quite articulate. He disappeared around the corner toward his own office, and Claire looked back at her screen. She picked up the coffee cup, set it down without drinking. Her assistant knocked lightly, entering with a fresh cup. "Your usual, Ms. Morgan." "Thanks, Rachel." The new coffee sat steaming on her desk. Claire ignored it, returning to her work, but her mind kept drifting to a night 6 months earlier. It had been late June, the kind of humid Boston evening that made the air conditioning work overtime. Claire had stayed at the office until well past midnight, buried in the quarterly report that would determine whether the board renewed their confidence in her leadership. The floor had been empty, silent except for the hum of electronics and the soft clicking of her keyboard. She'd been drowning in numbers for hours when a shadow appeared in her doorway. Marcus stood there holding a paper cup. He didn't say anything, just walked in and set it on the corner of her desk. The steam rose between them, carrying the rich scent of fresh coffee. "2 sugars," he said quietly. "A splash of cream." Claire looked up at him, surprised. She hadn't asked for coffee, hadn't mentioned being tired or needing anything. "How did you know?" Marcus paused in the doorway, his hand on the frame. "You mentioned it once. About a year ago. We were in that budget meeting with the finance team and someone brought the wrong order from the coffee shop." She stared at him. "You remembered that? I remember most things you say." Before she could respond, he was gone. Back down the hallway to his own office, leaving her alone with a perfectly made cup of coffee. Claire had sat there for a long moment, staring at the cup. Then she'd lifted it and taken a sip. Perfect. She'd never told anyone how she took her coffee. She'd never had to tell Marcus. But somehow in the year and a half before that night, he'd been paying attention, watching, learning the small details that made up who she was. Claire had finished the coffee slowly, her work forgotten. When the cup was empty, she'd set it down and looked toward Marcus's office. His light was still on. She could see his silhouette through the glass, bent over his own laptop, working just as late as she was. She'd wanted to go to him, to say thank you, to ask why he'd remembered something so small. But she didn't. Instead, she'd packed up her things and gone home carrying the empty cup with her. It sat in her kitchen cabinet, now washed but never used again. Claire blinked, pulling herself back to the present. The memory faded, but the feeling it left behind didn't. She picked up the coffee her assistant had brought, took 1 sip. Wrong. Too bitter, not enough cream. She set it down and pushed it away. Through the glass wall, Marcus walked past again. This time, he glanced her way. Their eyes met for just a second. He nodded slightly professionally and kept walking. Claire's chest tightened. She never told him how she took her coffee, but somehow he knew. If you're already hooked on Claire and Marcus's story, drop a comment below telling me what you think will happen next. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss part 2 where everything changes. The cafeteria was too loud. Claire sat by herself near the windows, picking at a salad she had no appetite for. Her laptop was open in front of her, budget spreadsheets glowing on the screen, but she couldn't focus on the numbers. The noise of the lunch crowd pressed in from all sides, conversations overlapping into an indistinct buzz that made her temples throb. She stabbed a piece of lettuce with her fork and tried to concentrate. Behind her, two voices cut through the ambient noise. "Did you hear Marcus has a date tonight?" Claire's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "No way," a second voice said. "Marcus Reed. He never dates." "I know, right? But Linda from accounting set it up. Some family friend or something. She said his mom's been nagging him about it for months." The first voice laughed. "I heard she's gorgeous. Works in finance, total catch." Claire set her fork down carefully. It clattered against the plastic tray louder than she intended. "He finally agreed," the voice continued. "Can you believe it after all this time?" Claire closed her laptop. The salad sat untouched in front of her, wilting under the fluorescent lights. Her chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around her ribs and pulled. A date. Tonight. She stood abruptly, gathering her things. The voices behind her kept talking, oblivious. "I wonder what she's like." "Probably perfect, someone who can handle the whole single dad thing." Claire walked away before she could hear more. Her heels clicked against the tile floor with each step too loud in her own ears. The elevator couldn't come fast enough. Back in her office, she closed the door and leaned against it. Through the glass wall, she could see Marcus at his desk phone, pressed to his ear, completely absorbed in whatever conversation he was having. He looked no different than he did any other day. Calm, professional, utterly unreadable. Claire sat down at her desk and opened her laptop again, but the numbers meant nothing. Her mind kept circling back to those voices in the cafeteria. A date. Tonight. With someone gorgeous who worked in finance. She told herself it didn't matter. Marcus was allowed to date. He was a single man, a grown adult, with every right to meet someone. It had nothing to do with her, but her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the desk and took a slow breath. It was fine. Everything was fine. She just needed to focus on work. There was the Q4 report to finalize, the board presentation to prepare, a dozen other tasks that required her attention. Marcus's personal life was none of her business. Except, it felt like her business. It felt like something breaking inside her chest. The afternoon crawled by. Claire tried to work, but every few minutes her eyes drifted to the glass wall, watching Marcus move through his own tasks with his usual efficiency. He was on calls, typing emails, reviewing documents. Nothing about his demeanor suggested anything unusual. At 5:15, he stood up and reached for his coat. Claire's pulse quickened. She grabbed her phone and texted him before she could think it through. "Need you. Q4 report, my office, now." The message delivered. She watched through the glass as Marcus's phone lit up on his desk. He picked it up, read the screen, and paused. Then he looked toward her office. Their eyes met through the glass. Claire forced herself to look away, back at her computer screen. A minute later, he knocked on her door frame. "You needed something." Claire gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit. We need to go over the final projections before the board meeting." Marcus glanced at his watch. It was 5:17. "I have something at 6. Can this wait until tomorrow? It can't wait." Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. But he sat down, setting his phone on the edge of her desk. Claire opened a file they had already reviewed twice. "Walk me through the revenue forecasts again." Marcus did, his voice steady and professional. He explained the numbers with the same careful precision he always used, pointing out trends and projections Claire already knew by heart. 5:30, 5:40, 5:50. She asked questions she knew the answers to, requested clarifications on sections they had finalized days ago, brought up concerns that weren't really concerns at all. Marcus answered everything patiently, but his gaze kept drifting to the clock on the wall. At 5:58, he cleared his throat. "Claire, I really need to go. Just one more thing. It's almost 6. This is important." Marcus set down the tablet he'd been referencing and looked at her directly. There was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Frustration, maybe. Or confusion. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but I have to leave. I can stay late tomorrow if you want to finish this then." Claire felt her jaw tighten. She wanted to say no, wanted to find another reason to keep him here to delay whatever he was rushing off to. But she couldn't think of anything that wouldn't sound desperate. "Fine," she said, her voice coming out sharper than she intended. "Go." Marcus stood tucking the tablet under his arm. "Thanks. I'll see you Monday." He left quickly, and Claire watched through the glass as he grabbed his coat and headed toward the elevator. His movements were purposeful, almost urgent. She stood and moved to the window overlooking the parking lot. A few minutes later, Marcus emerged from the building. He walked briskly to his car, a dark blue Honda parked in the second row. He opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and then before starting the engine, he flipped down the visor and checked his reflection in the mirror. Claire's breath caught. He adjusted his tie, ran a hand through his hair, took a visible breath like he was steadying himself. Then he started the car and pulled out of the lot. Claire stood at the window watching his taillights disappear into traffic. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She had no right to feel this way, no right at all. But watching him prepare himself for another woman felt like something sharp twisting in her chest. Claire grabbed her purse and coat. The elevator ride down felt endless. She kept telling herself to stop to go home to let this go. But her feet carried her to the parking garage anyway, and before she could talk herself out of it, she was sitting in her Audi with the engine running. 2 cars ahead. Marcus's Honda sat at the exit brake lights, glowing red. Snow had started to fall, light flakes that melted on contact with the windshield. Claire turned on the wipers and they scraped across the glass in a steady rhythm. Marcus's car turned left out of the garage. Claire's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What was she doing? This was insane. Following him like some obsessed teenager. If anyone from work saw her, if Marcus realized what she was doing, it would be humiliating. Worse than humiliating. It would be the end of everything between them, professional or otherwise. But she couldn't stop herself. She pulled out of the garage and followed. Traffic was heavy with the Friday evening rush. Claire stayed 2 cars back, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the traffic. The snow was falling harder now, coating the streets in a thin layer of white that reflected the headlights and street lamps. Marcus drove carefully, signaling his turns, maintaining a steady speed. He had no idea she was behind him. They headed toward Back Bay, weaving through streets lined with brick townhouses and small shops already decorated for the holidays. String lights glowed in windows. Wreaths hung on doors. Everything looked warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold knot of anxiety in Claire's stomach. After 15 minutes, Marcus pulled into a parking lot. Claire drove past and parked across the street, killing her engine. Through the thin veil of falling snow, she could see the restaurant he'd stopped at. Sorellina, an Italian place with large front windows and warm amber light spilling onto the sidewalk. Her breath fogged the inside of her windshield. She wiped it away with her sleeve and leaned forward. Marcus got out of his car and locked it. He was carrying a small bag, something wrapped in paper. A gift. Claire's stomach dropped. He walked into the restaurant, and through the window she watched him scan the interior. Then his face lit up with a smile and he moved toward a table near the back. A woman stood to greet him. She was young, late 20s maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She wore a red dress that fit her perfectly elegant and understated. When she smiled at Marcus, her whole face transformed. Claire couldn't breathe. Marcus set the bag on the table and pulled out a wrapped box. He handed it to the woman with a sheepish grin, saying something Claire couldn't hear. The woman's eyes widened. She unwrapped the box, carefully peeling back the paper with delicate fingers. When she opened it, she pulled out a scarf, cream-colored, soft and expensive-looking. The woman pressed it to her cheek, and then she stood up and threw her arms around Marcus's shoulders. He laughed. Actually, laughed, his head tilted back completely at ease in a way Claire rarely saw at work. They sat down together, leaning close across the table. The woman said something, and Marcus responded in his hands, gesturing as he talked. They looked comfortable together, natural, like two people who had known each other for years. Claire's vision blurred. She gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Her chest felt like it was caving in, ribs pressing against her lungs until she couldn't get enough air. This was it. This was the woman Marcus had chosen. Someone younger, warmer, easier to love than a workaholic CEO who had spent 3 years hiding behind glass walls and professional distance. Claire should leave. She should start the car and drive home and pretend she had never followed him here. She should let him have this. Let him be happy with someone who could give him what he needed. But her hand was already on the door handle. The cold air hit her face like a slap when she stepped out onto the sidewalk. Snow caught in her hair, melted against her skin. She barely felt it. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she crossed the street. Each step felt surreal, like she was watching herself from a distance, unable to stop the momentum carrying her forward. The restaurant door was heavy. She pushed it open and warm air rushed out, carrying the scent of garlic and fresh bread and wine. The hostess looked up, startled. "Do you have a reservation?" Claire didn't answer. She walked past the hostess stand, past the bar where couples sat, talking over drinks, past the other diners who glanced up curiously as she passed. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Marcus looked up. His expression froze. The woman in the red dress turned in her seat, confusion flickering across her face. Claire stopped at the edge of their table. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the restaurant must be able to hear it. The rational part of her brain was screaming at her to turn around, to leave, to salvage whatever dignity she had left. But the words came out anyway. "Why didn't you ever ask me?" The silence that followed felt infinite. Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The woman stared at her, bewildered. Around them, the restaurant noise faded to nothing. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Claire forced herself to look at the woman. "I'm sorry. I know this is incredibly rude and I have no right to be here, but I need to say this." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "I work with him. I've worked with him for 3 years, and I needed him to know that I—" She couldn't finish. The words stuck in her throat. The woman's expression shifted from confusion to something else. Understanding, maybe, or pity. And then, to Claire's absolute horror, the woman started to laugh. Not a cruel laugh. A genuine, surprised laugh that filled the space between them. Marcus covered his face with one hand and his shoulders began to shake. He was laughing too. Claire's face burned. The humiliation crashed over her in waves, drowning out everything else. She had just made a complete fool of herself in front of a restaurant full of strangers, and they were laughing at her. "I should go," she whispered. She turned toward the door, but Marcus was already on his feet. "Claire, wait." His hand caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "Please," he said, "sit down." Claire shook her head, unable to look at Marcus. "I made a mistake. I shouldn't have come here." But his hand was still around her wrist, gentle but insistent. The woman at the table stood up, and Claire braced herself for anger, for the confrontation she deserved. Instead, the woman extended her hand. "Hi," she said, her voice warm despite the laughter still dancing in her eyes. "I'm Jordan, Marcus's brother." The words didn't make sense at first. Claire stared at the outstretched hand, then at the woman's face, then back at Marcus. "Brother." Jordan nodded, a grin spreading across his face. Yeah, I just got back from Tokyo. 4 years photographing the street art scene there. He gestured to the scarf still draped over his chair. Marcus picked me up from Logan this afternoon. This is my welcome home dinner. Claire felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Brother. Not a date. Not a girlfriend. Brother. She couldn't form words. Her brain was still trying to catch up, still processing the fact that she had just humiliated herself in front of a restaurant full of people for absolutely nothing. Jordan glanced at Marcus, then back at Claire. His expression softened with understanding. For what it's worth, he talks about you constantly. Claire did this. Claire said that. Claire has this brilliant idea. Honestly, it gets exhausting. Jordan. Marcus said, his voice carrying a warning, but Jordan was already gathering his coat. I'm going to head out. Mom's expecting me anyway, and I promised I'd pick up Emma before 8. He leaned down and kissed Marcus on the cheek. Don't screw this up, he whispered, just loud enough for Claire to hear. Then he turned to Claire and stuck out his hand again. This time, she took it, her fingers numb. Really nice to meet you, Claire. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. He left, with a casual wave weaving through the tables toward the exit. The door chimed as it closed behind him, and suddenly Claire was alone with Marcus in a restaurant full of staring strangers. Marcus gestured to the empty chair across from him. Please, sit. Claire's legs felt weak. She sank into the chair Jordan had vacated, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. The scarf lay on the table between them, cream-colored silk that caught the candlelight. Marcus sat down slowly, his hands folding on the table. His face was still flushed, whether from laughter or embarrassment or something else Claire couldn't tell. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the restaurant gradually returned to normal. Conversations resumed. Silverware clinked against plates. A burst of laughter came from the bar, but at their table silence stretched out like a physical thing. Claire stared at her hands. I'm sorry. Don't be. I just made a complete fool of myself. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You were brave. She looked up at that meeting, his eyes for the first time since she'd barged into the restaurant. There was no judgment in his expression, no mockery. Just something soft and open that made her chest ache. I thought... She trailed off, not sure how to finish. I know what you thought, Marcus said quietly. A waiter appeared at their table looking uncomfortable. I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you still want to order, or... Marcus glanced at Claire, a question in his eyes. She should leave. She should let him finish his evening in peace, but she found herself nodding. We'll stay, Marcus told the waiter. Can we get another menu and a glass of wine for the lady? The waiter nodded clearly, relieved to have a simple task. He hurried off, returning a moment later with a menu and a wine list. Claire stared at the menu without reading it. The words blurred together into meaningless shapes. She was aware of Marcus watching her waiting. When the waiter came back, she ordered the first thing her eyes landed on. Marcus ordered something else, and then they were alone again. The wine arrived. Claire took a sip, then another. The alcohol burned going down, but it loosened something in her chest. How long? Marcus asked. Claire set down her glass. How long have you? He paused, searching for words. How long have you felt this way? The question hung between them. Claire wanted to deflect, to make a joke, to rebuild the professional walls that had just come crashing down, but she was too tired, too exposed. The coffee, she said finally. 6 months ago, when you brought it to me late at night. Marcus's expression shifted. That's when you knew. That's when I couldn't pretend anymore. She traced the rim of her wine glass with one finger. You remembered how I take it? I never told you, but you remembered anyway. You mentioned it once, Marcus said. About a year before that. We were in a budget meeting with the finance team and someone brought the wrong order from the coffee shop. You said you couldn't drink it because it wasn't sweet enough. Claire stared at him. You remembered that. From a random comment in a meeting. I remember most things you say. The simplicity of the statement hit her harder than any grand declaration could have. She felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she'd been building for 3 years, suddenly crumbling. Why? She whispered. Marcus looked down at his hands. Can I ask you something first? Claire nodded. What did you think was happening tonight when you followed me here? Heat rushed to her face. I heard people talking at lunch. They said you had a date, that your mom set you up with some family friend who works in finance. And you believed them. Why wouldn't I? You never talk about your personal life. You never mention dating. And then suddenly, you're leaving work early, checking your reflection in the car mirror. She stopped, realizing how much she'd been watching him. Marcus's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I was nervous about seeing Jordan. It's been 4 years. I wanted to make sure I looked okay. Oh, but that doesn't answer my question. What did you think you were going to do when you followed me here? Claire took another sip of wine, buying time. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. I couldn't stand the idea of you being with someone else. Of you choosing someone else without me ever telling you that you what? She met his eyes. There was no point in holding back now. That I have feelings for you. Real feelings. Not just respect or admiration or whatever I've been telling myself for the past 3 years. Actual, terrifying, inconvenient feelings. The words hung in the air between them. Claire waited for him to pull back to remind her of all the reasons this was impossible. The power dynamic, the professional implications, his daughter, the complexity of dating a single father. Instead, Marcus reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Claire, he said quietly. I've been telling myself the same thing for 3 years. Her breath caught. What? That it's impossible. That you're my boss and I'm your employee. That I'm a single father with a 7-year-old daughter, which isn't exactly an appealing package. That you deserve someone who can give you their full attention, not someone who has to leave every meeting by 6 to pick up his kid. He squeezed her hand gently. I've been telling myself all of that every single day, and it hasn't changed the fact that I look for you every morning when I get to the office. That I make excuses to stop by your door. That every time you smile at something, I say it makes my entire day better. Claire felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, but one escaped anyway, trailing down her cheek. Then why didn't you ever say anything, she asked. For the same reason you didn't, Marcus said. Because I was afraid. Afraid of making things awkward between us. Afraid of losing the one person at work I actually trust. Afraid that if I said something and you didn't feel the same way, I'd have to leave. And I can't afford to leave Claire. Not with Emma depending on me. His voice cracked slightly on his daughter's name, and Claire saw the weight he carried. The responsibility that shaped every decision he made. The fear that any misstep could cost him the stability his daughter needed. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. I never thought you'd feel the same way. I thought I was just your boss. Someone you respected, but didn't actually see. Claire. Marcus leaned forward, his voice intense. I've always seen you. From the first interview 3 years ago, I've seen you. Their food arrived, breaking the moment. The waiter set down plates. Neither of them had any appetite for refilled Claire's wine glass, and disappeared again. They ate slowly, the conversation shifting to safer topics. Marcus told her about Jordan's photography, about the gallery show he was planning in the spring. Claire told him about the board meeting next week, about her concerns with the Q4 projections. But underneath the small talk, something hummed between them. Every time their eyes met, every accidental brush of hands reaching for water glasses, every pause that stretched a beat too long, when the plates were cleared away and they were left with just coffee. Marcus spoke again. "What are you thinking right now?" Claire wrapped her hands around her cup. "I'm thinking about how this changes everything. How we go back to work on Monday and pretend this conversation never happened. How we navigate being what, I don't know, whatever this is." Marcus set down his cup. "Do you want to pretend it never happened?" "No." The word came out faster than she intended. "No, I don't." "Then we don't pretend. We figure it out." "How?" "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted. "But I know I don't want to spend another 3 years watching you through glass walls and pretending I don't feel what I feel." Claire's throat tightened. "What about Emma? I know she's your priority, Marcus. I would never ask you to change that. But if we do this, I need to know what it means. I've never been around kids. I don't know how to be part of a child's life. What if I'm terrible at it?" Marcus's expression softened. "Emma's been through a lot. Her mom left 2 years ago and she still doesn't really understand why. My mother's been amazing, but Emma knows it's not the same as having 2 parents." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not asking you to be her mother, Claire. But if this is going to work, if we're going to try this, then eventually she's going to be part of your life too. And I need to know you're okay with that." Claire thought about the little girl she'd only seen from a distance, at the company picnic last summer playing on the swings while Marcus watched, at the Halloween party dressed as a dinosaur clutching her father's hand. She thought about what it would mean to be with someone who had a child, the responsibility, the complexity, the fact that she would never come first. And she realized that none of it scared her as much as the thought of walking away from Marcus. "I'm okay with it," she said. "I don't know how to be good at it yet, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take it slow for her sake." Marcus's grip on her hand and tightened. "That's all I can ask." They sat in silence for a moment, and Claire felt the weight of what they were doing, the risk they were both taking. 3 years of careful professional distance gone in a single evening. "There's something else you should know," Marcus said, "about why I took this job in the first place." Claire looked up. "What do you mean?" "I told you earlier that you saw me as a person during the interview, that you asked about childcare and flexible hours when no one else did." "I remember. What I didn't tell you is that I almost didn't take the job. I had another offer, better pay, closer to home, fewer responsibilities." Claire's stomach dropped. "Why didn't you take it?" Marcus looked at her steadily. "Because of something you said at the end of the interview. You told me that you valued people who showed up even when it was hard. People who did the work even when no one was watching. You said that kind of integrity mattered more than any resume." He paused. "And I thought, this is someone I want to work for. Someone who sees past the surface. Someone who values the same things I do." Claire felt her eyes welling up again. "I don't remember saying that." "I do. I remember every word." Marcus smiled slightly. "So I took the job with lower pay and a longer commute because I wanted to work with you. And then I spent 3 years falling in love with you and telling myself it was impossible." The words landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Falling in love. Claire's breath caught. "Marcus, I know it's too soon to say that. I know we're just figuring this out, but you asked me how long, and that's the truth. It's been 3 years of trying not to love you and failing every single day." Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Marcus looked up startled, probably thinking she was going to run. Instead, she moved around the table and stopped in front of him. "Stand up," she said. Marcus stood slowly, confusion and hope warring in his expression. Claire reached up and touched his face, her hand trembling slightly. "I need you to know something." "What?" "I don't deserve you. I'm difficult and controlling, and I've spent 3 years hiding behind work because I was too afraid to feel this. But I do feel it, and I don't want to be afraid anymore." Marcus covered her hand with his, pressing it against his cheek. "You're not difficult. You're brilliant and dedicated, and you care more than you let anyone see." "I'm terrified," Claire whispered. "So am I. What if I'm bad at this, at being with someone, at being in Emma's life?" "Then you'll be bad at it," Marcus said, "and we'll figure it out together." Around them, the restaurant continued its evening rhythm. Other couples finishing meals. The staff beginning to clean up. The world moving forward while Claire and Marcus stood frozen in their own small universe. "I should let you go," Claire said, finally, though she didn't move. "It's getting late." "I don't want to go. You have to pick up Emma. Jordan's getting her." Marcus's hand slid from her face to her shoulder. "I texted him while you were in the bathroom. He said to take my time." Claire felt a laugh bubble up, surprised and genuine. "You planned this?" "No, but I'm not letting you walk away twice in one night." "I wouldn't walk away." "Wouldn't you?" The question hung between them. Claire thought about the past 3 years. All the moments she could have said something and didn't. All the time she chose safety over risk, control over vulnerability. "No," she said finally. "Not anymore." Marcus smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Gone was the careful professional mask he wore at work. This was something raw and real and entirely for her. "Come on," he said, reaching for his wallet. "Let's get out of here." Marcus paid the bill while Claire waited by the door, her coat pulled tight against the chill that seeped through the glass. Outside, snow fell in thick flakes now coating the sidewalk, and the cars parked along the street. Boston looked softer under the white blanket. The harsh edges of the city smoothed into something almost magical. When Marcus joined her, they stepped out into the cold together. The temperature had dropped since Claire first arrived. Her breath came out in visible puffs, and she pulled her coat tighter. "Where did you park?" Marcus asked. "Across the street." "I'll walk you." They crossed at the light, their footsteps muffled by the fresh snow. Claire's heels weren't made for this weather, and she felt herself slip slightly. Marcus's hand shot out, steadying her at the elbow. He didn't let go after she found her footing. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Always." They walked in silence for half a block. Claire's car was parked near a small park, the trees heavy with snow, the benches already buried. String lights hung between the lampposts, casting a warm glow over everything. Marcus stopped before they reached her car. "Can we walk for a bit? I'm not ready for this to end yet." Claire looked at her impractical heels, then at his face. "Okay." They turned down a side street, moving deeper into Back Bay. The neighborhood was quiet this time of night. Most of the shops closed their windows dark except for the holiday displays still lit from within. A bakery, a bookstore, a wine shop with bottles arranged in a pyramid behind the glass. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said after they'd walked another block. "About the day I interviewed with you." Claire glanced at him. "You mentioned it earlier, at the restaurant. I didn't tell you everything." They passed under a streetlight, and Claire could see Marcus's face clearly. He looked nervous in a way she'd never seen at work. Vulnerable, young almost. "I was a mess that day," he continued. The divorce had just been finalized. Emma was 4 years old and asking questions I didn't know how to answer. My ex-wife had moved to California with barely any warning. Said she needed space to find herself. said being a mother was suffocating her. Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to say something, but she sensed Marcus needed to get this out. "I'd been job hunting for 3 months," he said. "Every interview was the same. They'd look at my resume, seem interested, and then I'd mention Emma, mention needing flexible hours for pickup and drop-off, mention that sometimes I'd have to leave if she got sick or if my mom couldn't watch her." He shoved his hands deeper into his coat pockets. "And I'd watch their faces change, see them mentally crossing me off the list. One guy actually told me I should consider whether I was really ready to commit to a demanding role when I had personal complications." "That's awful," Claire said softly. It was reality. Single fathers aren't exactly prized in the corporate world, especially not ones who need accommodations. He paused under another streetlight. "So, when I walked into your office that day, I'd already decided to lower my expectations. Take whatever I could get. Be grateful for anything." Claire remembered that interview. Remembered Marcus sitting across from her, his resume impressive, but his posture guarded. She'd noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to his phone like he was expecting bad news. "You asked me about Emma right away," Marcus said. "Before we even talked about job responsibilities or salary. You asked her name, how old she was, what she liked to do." "I remember. And then you asked if I needed help with childcare, if flexible hours would make things easier, if there was anything the company could do to support me as a parent." His voice went rough. "No one else asked those questions, Claire. No one else saw me as anything other than a liability." They stopped at a corner, waiting for the light to change, even though there were no cars coming. The snow was falling harder now, catching in Claire's hair on Marcus's shoulders. "You saw me as a person," Marcus continued, "as someone trying to do his best in an impossible situation. And at the end of the interview, you told me that you valued integrity over credentials, that showing up mattered more than being perfect." The light changed. They crossed. "I walked out of that interview and sat in my car for 20 minutes, Marcus said. Just sat there trying to process what had happened. Because for the first time in months, someone had made me feel like I wasn't broken. Like being a father wasn't something I needed to apologize for." Claire's throat felt tight. "I was just being decent. To you, maybe. To me, it was everything." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. Snow fell between them, fat flakes that caught the light. "I called you 3 days later to accept the job offer. And I almost told you then." "Told me what? That I was already half in love with you." The words hung in the cold air, visible almost like their breath. Claire stared at him. "Marcus, I know, it sounds insane. We'd had one conversation, one interview, but you'd shown me more kindness in 45 minutes than anyone else had in months. And I knew." He paused. "I knew I wanted to work with you, learn from you, be around you as much as possible. Why didn't you say anything? In 3 years, why didn't you?" "Because I couldn't risk it," Marcus said simply. "I had Emma to think about, a job I needed, a boss who trusted me, and I told myself that being near you was enough, that I could be satisfied with that." "Were you satisfied?" "No." His laugh was short and bitter. "Not even a little bit. Every day was torture. Watching you through those glass walls, seeing you stressed and knowing I couldn't help the way I wanted to. Making your coffee and leaving before you could thank me because I was afraid if I stayed, if we talked, I'd say something I couldn't take back." Claire felt tears prick at her eyes again. "I thought you were just being professional. I thought all those little things you did, they were just you being good at your job. They were me trying not to love you and failing spectacularly." The snow was really coming down now, thick enough that Claire could barely see the street signs. Her feet were freezing in her impractical heels. Her coat wasn't warm enough for this weather, but she didn't care. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all the time we wasted." "Don't be sorry. Be here. Now." Marcus reached out and brushed snow from her hair. His hand lingered near her face, and Claire leaned into the touch without thinking. His palm was warm against her cold cheek. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what? Everything. This. Us. Hurting Emma. Messing up at work. Being bad at this." "At what? Being someone's." She struggled for the word. "Being your person." Marcus's thumb traced along her cheekbone. "You're already my person, Claire. You have been for 3 years. This just makes it official. What if I can't do it? What if I'm too broken to be what you need? You're not broken. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." His voice was firm. "I've worked with you for 3 years. I've seen you under pressure, stressed, exhausted, overwhelmed. And you know what? I've never seen you being anything less than extraordinary." Claire shook her head. "You're seeing what you want to see. I'm seeing the truth. And the truth is that you're brilliant and kind and stronger than you give yourself credit for." He paused. "The truth is that I love you, not despite your flaws, but including them, all of them." The words hit Claire like a physical force. Love. He'd said it twice now, and it didn't feel rushed or premature. It felt like something that had been building for years, finally given voice. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what? Be vulnerable. Let someone see me. Really see me." "Then start small," Marcus said. "Tell me one true thing. One thing you've never told anyone else." Claire looked up at him. Snow caught in his eyelashes. His face was open, patient, waiting. "I'm terrified of becoming my father," she said finally. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his hand on her face grew steadier. "Tell me." "He left when I was 12. Just walked out one day. Told my mom he couldn't do it anymore. Being married, being a father. Said he felt trapped." Claire's voice shook. "And my whole life I've been so careful not to trap anyone. Not to need anyone. Not to be the kind of person someone wants to escape from. Claire. That's why I don't date. That's why I threw myself into work. Because if I don't let anyone close, they can't leave. They can't make me feel the way my mom felt when he walked out." Marcus's other hand came up, cupping her face between both palms now. "Look at me." She did. "You are not your father. You are not someone people want to escape from. You're someone people would be lucky to have in their lives. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've been in your life for 3 years and I've never once wanted to leave. Not even when it hurt to stay." A sob broke from Claire's chest, surprising them both. She tried to pull away, embarrassed, but Marcus held her steady. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're okay." "I'm not. I'm a mess. I followed you to a restaurant like a stalker. I crashed your dinner with your brother. I'm standing in the snow in heels that cost more than most people's rent, crying like an idiot. You're perfect. I'm not. You are to me." Claire laughed through her tears, and it came out broken and raw. "You have terrible judgment." "The best judgment," Marcus corrected. He wiped her tears with his thumbs, careful and gentle. "And for the record, I'm glad you followed me. I'm glad you crashed my dinner. I'm glad you're here even if your heels are impractical and you're freezing." "I am freezing." "Come on, let's keep walking. I know a place nearby." They started moving again, Marcus's arm around her shoulders, now tucking her against his side. Claire leaned into him, drawing warmth from his presence. They turned onto Newbury Street, where the shops were upscale and the sidewalks were wider. The snow had transformed everything into a winter postcard. Window displays glowed with soft light. A few hardy pedestrians hurried past, heads down against the cold. Marcus stopped in front of a small flower shop. Through the window, Claire could see buckets of roses and lilies arranged in neat rows, their colors muted in the dim light. An older woman stood behind the counter wrapping a bouquet. "Wait here," Marcus said. He pushed open the door and a small bell chimed. Claire watched through the window as he approached the counter and spoke to the woman. She nodded, walked to one of the buckets, and pulled out a single, long-stemmed red rose. The woman wrapped the stem in brown paper and handed it to Marcus. He paid, said something that made her smile, and came back outside. He held the rose out to Claire. She took it confused. "What's this for?" "I want to ask you something, the right way this time." Claire's heart started beating faster. Marcus took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and sure. "Claire Morgan, would you have dinner with me not as my boss, not as my employee, just as a man who's wanted to ask you this for 3 years, but didn't have the courage until you showed up tonight and made me realize I was wasting time being afraid?" The simplicity of it broke something open in Claire's chest. No grand gestures, no elaborate planning, just Marcus standing in the snow asking her out with a single rose. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." Marcus smiled, and it was the kind of smile that changed his whole face, open and genuine and completely without the careful control he wore at work. "Tomorrow night," he asked. "Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live. Then tell me." Claire rattled off her address and Marcus typed it into his phone. When he looked up again, there was something different in his expression, something heated and intent. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. The question should have been unnecessary after everything they'd said tonight, but Claire appreciated that he asked anyway, that he gave her the choice. "Yes." Marcus stepped closer. One hand came up to cup her face, the other settling at her waist. He paused for just a second, his eyes searching hers, giving her one last chance to change her mind. Then his lips met hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, testing. But when Claire's free hand came up to fist in his coat, when she made a small sound in the back of her throat, Marcus deepened it. He kissed her like he'd been thinking about it for 3 years, like he'd memorized exactly how he wanted this to go and was determined to make it perfect. His hand slid from her face into her hair, careful not to pull, but firm enough to hold her close. Claire dropped the rose. She heard it hit the snow, but couldn't bring herself to care. Both her hands were in his coat now, pulling him closer, trying to erase the space between them that had existed for so long. Marcus's arm around her waist tightened, and suddenly they weren't just kissing. They were wrapped around each other, desperate and relieved all at once. 3 years of repressed wanting poured into this single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Claire rested her forehead against his. Her eyes stayed closed, afraid that if she opened them, the moment would shatter. "I can't believe I followed you here," she whispered. "I can't believe it took you this long." She opened her eyes and found him smiling at her. "What happens Monday? We tell HR. We make sure everything is above board. We figure out the logistics. And if they say one of us has to transfer, then we figure it out, together." Marcus brushed snow from her hair. "I'm not losing you, Claire. Not after finally having you. What if people talk? Let them talk. What if it makes things awkward at work? Then it makes things awkward, we'll deal with it. What if I'm terrible at this, at being in a relationship?" Marcus's expression softened. "Then you'll be terrible at it. And I'll be terrible at it too, because I haven't dated anyone seriously since my divorce, and we'll figure it out together." Claire felt tears threaten again, but this time they were different. Lighter. "You keep saying that, together. Because that's what this is. Not you alone, not me alone, us together." The word settled over Claire like a blanket. Together. It should have been terrifying. Should have sent her running back to her carefully controlled life. Instead, it felt like coming home. "I should let you go," she said finally, though she made no move to step away. "It's getting late. Jordan's probably wondering where you are." "He can wait a little longer." Marcus bent down and picked up the fallen rose. He handed it back to Claire, and she took it carefully, mindful of the thorns pressing through the paper. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "Let's get you to your car before you lose all feeling in your toes." They walked back through the snow, hand in hand now. The storm was letting up slightly, the flakes smaller and less dense. By the time they reached Claire's Audi, the sidewalk was covered in at least 3 inches of fresh powder. Marcus waited while Claire unlocked her car with numb fingers. She tossed the rose onto the passenger seat and turned back to him. "Thank you," she said. "For tonight, for everything. Don't thank me. You're the one who was brave enough to walk into that restaurant. I'm the one who made a complete fool of myself. You're the one who changed everything." Marcus pulled her close again, his arms around her waist. "Drive safe. Text me when you get home." "I will." He kissed her once more. Quick and sweet this time, a promise rather than a question. Then he stepped back and opened her car door. Claire got in her legs, shaking from cold and adrenaline. Marcus closed the door carefully and stepped back onto the sidewalk. Through the window, their eyes met. He raised one hand in a small wave. Claire started the engine and turned on the heat, which blasted cold air for the first few seconds. She looked down at the rose on her seat, its petals perfect despite the fall, and felt something shift inside her chest. 3 years. 3 years of watching Marcus through glass walls, of pretending she didn't feel what she felt, of choosing safety over risk. And now, here she was sitting in her car in a snowstorm, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her heart feeling too big for her chest. She put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, she watched Marcus stand on the sidewalk, snow falling around him, his hands in his pockets. He didn't move until she turned the corner, and he disappeared from view. The drive home passed in a blur. Claire's mind was too full to focus on the road properly, but muscle memory carried her through the familiar streets. By the time she pulled into her parking garage, the snow had mostly stopped. She sat in the car for a long moment, engine off, heat fading. The rose lay on the passenger seat, and Claire picked it up carefully. The paper was damp from snow, but the flower itself was pristine. She brought it to her nose and breathed in the subtle scent. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Did you make it home safely?" Claire smiled and typed back, "Just pulled in. Thank you for tonight." The response came immediately. "Thank you for being brave enough to follow me. Sleep well, Claire." She stared at the screen for a moment, then typed one more message. "I'm still terrified." "Me too. But we're terrified together. That's something." Claire read the message 3 times before setting her phone down. She got out of the car, locked it, and headed for the elevator with the rose clutched in one hand. Inside her apartment, she filled a vase with water and set the rose on her kitchen counter where she'd see it first thing in the morning. Then she collapsed onto her couch, still in her coat, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Fear, hope, joy, terror, relief, love. She was in love with Marcus Reed. Had been for longer than she'd admitted to herself, and somehow impossibly he loved her back. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "By the way, I still owe you that dinner. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Wear something comfortable. We're not going anywhere fancy." Claire laughed, the sound surprising in her quiet apartment. She typed back, "Where are we going? It's a surprise. Trust me." She looked at the rose on her counter, thought about Marcus's hand in hers, his lips on hers, his voice saying together, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Yes," she typed. "I trust you." Part 5, The New Beginning. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Claire sat at her desk at 7:30 an hour before most of the office would arrive. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face in the snow, felt his hands in her hair, heard him saying, "I love you," like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her coffee sat untouched on the desk. She'd made it herself this morning, but it tasted wrong. Too bitter. Not enough cream. Through the glass wall, the office was still mostly empty. A few early birds moved through the hallways, but Marcus's desk remained dark. Claire opened her email and found the message she'd been dreading. A calendar invitation from Lena Martinez, the HR director. Subject line: Meeting re-workplace relationship disclosure. The meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock, 30 minutes from now. Claire's stomach twisted. This was the part she'd been trying not to think about all weekend. The practical reality of what she and Marcus were attempting. The policies and procedures and potential complications. She clicked accept on the invitation and tried to focus on other emails, but the words blurred together. At 7:50, Marcus arrived. Claire looked up as he walked past her office, and their eyes met through the glass. He paused for just a second, and something passed between them. A question, an acknowledgement, a shared nervousness about what was coming. He gave her a small nod and continued to his desk. Claire watched him set down his bag, turn on his computer, and check his phone. Everything looked normal, professional, like Friday night had never happened. Except when he looked back at her office, his expression was softer than it had ever been at work. At exactly 8 o'clock, Claire's phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "Ready when you are. Conference room B." Claire stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked out of her office. Marcus was already in the hallway, heading in the same direction. They fell into step together, careful not to touch, but close enough that Claire could feel the warmth of him beside her. "You okay?" Marcus asked quietly, terrified. "Me too." They reached the conference room. Lena was already inside, sitting at the head of the table with a tablet and a stack of papers. She looked up as they entered and gestured to the chairs across from her. "Good morning. Close the door, please." Marcus shut the door, and they sat down. The room felt too small suddenly, too formal for what was essentially a conversation about their personal lives. Lena folded her hands on the table and looked at them both. Her expression was neutral, professional, giving nothing away. "So," she said, "you two." Claire opened her mouth to explain, but Lena held up a hand. "Let me save us all some time. You've been dancing around each other for 3 years. Everyone in this office has noticed. The only people who seemed oblivious were you two." She picked up her tablet. "Now you've finally done something about it, and you need to make sure it doesn't create any conflicts of interest or policy violations." Claire blinked. Everyone noticed. "Claire, you look at him like he hung the moon. He makes you coffee the way you like it, even though you've never told him how you take it. You two have more chemistry through a glass wall than most people have on dates." Lena smiled slightly. "Trust me, we noticed." Marcus shifted in his seat beside Claire. "We want to handle this properly. We don't want anyone to think there's favoritism or that we're violating company policy." "Good, that's why we're here." Lena slid 2 forms across the table. "These are relationship disclosure forms. You'll both need to fill them out and sign them. They acknowledge that you're in a relationship and agree to maintain professional boundaries at work." Claire picked up the form, scanning the text. It was straightforward. Name, department, nature of relationship, agreement to avoid conflicts of interest. "There's one other thing we need to address," Lena continued. "The reporting structure. Claire, as CEO, you're Marcus's direct supervisor. That creates a potential conflict." Claire's stomach dropped. "Are you saying one of us has to transfer?" "Not necessarily, but we do need to adjust who Marcus reports to. Effective immediately, he'll report to me instead of you. Any decisions involving his performance reviews, salary adjustments, or promotions will go through me and the executive team, not you. Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense. It also means, Lena said, looking directly at Claire, that you need to be extremely careful about how you interact at work. No public displays of affection. No closed-door meetings alone unless there's a work necessity. No perception of special treatment. We understand, Claire said. I'm not trying to make this difficult. I'm trying to protect both of you. Lena's voice softened. You're both valuable employees. I don't want to see either of you put in a position where your integrity is questioned because of this relationship. They spent the next 20 minutes filling out forms and discussing specific scenarios. What if they disagreed on a business decision in a meeting? What if other employees complained about favoritism? What if the relationship ended? That last question hung in the air like a weight. If it ends, Marcus said finally, we handle it like adults. We keep working. We stay professional. And if you can't, Lena asked. Marcus glanced at Claire. Then one of us leaves, but that's not going to happen. Lena studied them both for a long moment. Then she signed the forms and slid copies back to them. Okay, you're official. Congratulations, I guess. Thank you, Claire said, for handling this so professionally. Just don't make out in the supply closet. Jeff from accounting did that last year, and it was a whole situation. Marcus laughed, the tension finally breaking. Noted. They stood to leave, but Lena called after them. One more thing. Claire, can you stay for a minute? Marcus looked at Claire, concern flickering across his face. She nodded slightly and he left, closing the door behind him. Lena waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway. Then she leaned back in her chair and studied Claire. How long have you been in love with him? The question caught Claire off guard. Is that relevant to the HR discussion? No, I'm asking as your friend. Claire and Lena had worked together for 5 years. They'd been through budget crises and board meetings and countless late nights. But they'd never been the type to discuss personal lives over drinks or share relationship advice. 3 years, Claire admitted. Maybe longer. I don't know when it started exactly. And you're sure about this, about him? I've never been sure about anything in my life. Lena smiled. Good, because he's been in love with you just as long, and watching you two pretend otherwise has been exhausting. She stood and gathered her papers. Now go run your company, and try not to stare at him through the glass walls quite so obviously. Claire left the conference room feeling lighter than she had all morning. The formal part was done. The policies were in place. Everything was official and above board. She walked back to her office and found Marcus waiting by her door. Everything okay? He asked. Everything's fine. Lena just wanted to make sure I knew what I was getting into. And do you... Claire looked at him, at this man who had brought her coffee in the middle of the night, who had waited 3 years because he was afraid of losing her, who had stood in the snow and told her he loved her, like it was the simplest truth in the world. Yes, she said, I do. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday evening, Claire found herself standing on the front porch of a house in Brookline holding a bottle of wine and trying not to panic. You're going to be fine, Marcus said, beside her, his hand warm on the small of her back. What if she doesn't like me? She'll like you. You don't know that. Marcus turned her to face him. Claire, Emma has asked me every single day this week when she gets to meet you. She's been planning what to show you. She's nervous, too. A 7-year-old is nervous about meeting me. She wants you to think she's cool. That surprised a laugh out of Claire. She's 7. Of course she's cool. The front door opened before Marcus could knock. A woman in her 60s stood there, her face lighting up when she saw them. "You must be Claire. I'm Diane Marcus's mother. Come in, come in. It's freezing out here." The house was warm and lived in the kind of place that felt like a home rather than just a space. Photos covered the walls. Toys were scattered on the living room floor. The smell of something cooking drifted from the kitchen. "Jordan's in the kitchen," Diane said, taking Claire's coat. "And Emma's upstairs. She's been pacing for the last hour." A young man appeared from the kitchen and Claire recognized him immediately. Jordan grinned when he saw her. "The woman from the restaurant, I was hoping I'd see you again." He pulled her into a hug before she could respond, and Claire found herself laughing despite her nervousness. "It's good to see you, too, without the public humiliation this time." "Please? That was the most entertaining thing I've seen in years." Jordan glanced at Marcus. "I'm telling that story at your wedding." "There's not going to be a wedding," Marcus said, but his ears turned red. "Yet," Jordan added. "There's not going to be a wedding yet." A small voice came from the stairway. "Is she here?" Everyone turned. A little girl stood on the landing, one hand on the banister, the other clutching a stuffed dinosaur. She had Marcus's eyes and dark hair pulled into 2 braids. She wore a purple dress that looked slightly too fancy for a casual Sunday dinner. "Emma," Marcus said gently, "come say hello." Emma came down the stairs slowly, suddenly shy. She stopped at the bottom and looked at Claire with serious evaluating eyes. Claire crouched down to her level, remembering what Marcus had said about making herself less intimidating. "Hi, Emma. I'm Claire. Your dad's told me a lot about you." "Like what?" Emma's voice was quiet but curious. "Like that you're the smartest kid in your class, and that you love dinosaurs, and that you're really good at soccer." Emma's expression brightened slightly. "I'm a forward. I scored 3 goals last game." "That's amazing. I never scored a single goal when I played soccer." Really, I was terrible at sports." Emma considered this information. "That's okay. Not everyone is good at sports." "That's very understanding of you." Emma took a step closer, still clutching her dinosaur. "Do you want to see my room? I have dinosaur models." Claire glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to," Claire said. Emma's face split into a smile. She reached out and took Claire's hand, tugging her toward the stairs. Claire let herself be led aware of 3 pairs of adult eyes watching them with varying degrees of hope and amusement. Emma's room was exactly what Claire expected. Purple walls covered with dinosaur posters, a bookshelf overflowing with books, a desk where art supplies were scattered across the surface. "This is my Triceratops," Emma said, picking up a plastic model from her shelf. "It's my favorite because it has 3 horns and it can protect itself. It's very cool. And this is my T-Rex. Everyone thinks T-Rex is the best, but I think Triceratops is better because it's a herbivore. That means it only eats plants." Claire sat down on the floor, and Emma joined her, pulling out model after model and explaining each one in detail. She talked about the Cretaceous period and extinction events and which dinosaurs could fly, even though technically they weren't dinosaurs, they were pterosaurs. Claire listened genuinely fascinated, not just by the information, but by Emma herself, by the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she loved, by the careful way she handled each model, making sure Claire saw every detail. After about 20 minutes, Emma set down the Brachiosaurus she'd been showing Claire and looked at her directly. "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" The question was direct and without guile. Claire appreciated that. "I think so. Is that okay with you?" Emma tilted her head, considering. "My friend Sarah's dad has a girlfriend. Sarah doesn't like her very much." Claire's stomach dropped. Why not? Because she tries to pretend she's Sarah's mom. But she's not. You're right, she's not. Emma picked at the carpet. My mom left. She said she needed to go to California to find herself. I don't really understand what that means. Claire's chest ached. I'm sorry that happened to you. Dad says it's not my fault. That sometimes adults make choices that don't make sense. Emma looked up. Are you going to leave too? The question was so honest, so vulnerable, that Claire felt tears prick at her eyes. She thought about what Marcus had said about Emma asking questions he didn't know how to answer, about how much this little girl had been through. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, Claire said carefully. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere right now, and I'm not trying to be your mom. You already have a mom, even if she's not here. Then what are you trying to be? It was a fair question. Claire thought about it for a moment. I'm trying to be your dad's person, and maybe if you want I could be your friend too. Emma studied her face, clearly weighing this answer. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, but you have to like dinosaurs. Those are the rules. Claire laughed, relief flooding through her. I can learn about dinosaurs. Good, because there's a lot to learn. Emma stood and pulled Claire to her feet. Come on, I want to show you the drawing I made of a stegosaurus. They spent another 15 minutes in Emma's room before Diane called them down for dinner. The meal was chaotic in the best way. Jordan told stories about Tokyo. Diane asked Claire about her job. Emma interrupted constantly with dinosaur facts and questions. Marcus sat beside Claire at the table, and under the surface his hand found hers. He squeezed gently and Claire squeezed back. After dinner, while the adults cleaned up, Emma pulled Claire aside. I made you something, she said shyly. She led Claire back to her room and picked up a piece of paper from her desk. It was a drawing of a woman with dark hair standing next to a man and a little girl. They were all holding hands. At the top, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, it said, My family. Claire's throat went tight. Emma, this is beautiful. That's you, Emma said, pointing to the woman. I drew you with us. Is that okay? Claire crouched down and pulled Emma into a hug. It's more than okay, thank you. Emma hugged her back, and Claire felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was about this little girl who had been brave enough to include her in her family portrait, who had lost one person who was supposed to love her and was willing to risk trusting another. When they came back downstairs, Marcus took one look at Claire's face and knew something had changed. He raised his eyebrows in question. Claire showed him the drawing. Marcus's eyes went soft. He looked at Emma, who was suddenly very interested in the floor. That's a really good drawing, kiddo, he said, his voice rough. Claire liked it, Emma said. I love it, Claire corrected. I'm going to put it on my fridge at home. Emma beamed. Later that evening, after saying goodbye to Diane and Jordan, after buckling Emma into her car seat and driving back through the quiet streets of Brookline, Marcus walked Claire to her car. That went well, he said. She gave me a drawing of us as a family. I saw. How do you feel about that? Claire leaned against her car. Terrified, honored, like I'm going to mess this up somehow. You won't. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Marcus stepped closer, his hands settling on her waist. Emma doesn't open up to people easily. The fact that she showed you her dinosaurs and made you a drawing means she already trusts you. I don't want to let her down. Then don't. Just keep showing up. Keep being yourself. That's all she needs. Claire looked up at him. Is that all you need too? It's all I've ever needed. He kissed her soft and sweet, and Claire let herself sink into it. 2 weeks ago, this had been impossible. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When they pulled apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I love you too. The words still felt new, still carried weight every time she said them. But they were getting easier, more natural. Claire drove home with the drawing carefully placed on her passenger seat. When she got to her apartment, she put it on her refrigerator exactly as she'd promised Emma. Then she made herself a cup of coffee. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. It was terrible, not sweet enough, too much cream despite her measurements. She dumped it out and made another. Still wrong. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Did Emma wear you out?" Claire smiled and typed back. "She's wonderful, but I think I need dinosaur lessons. She'll be happy to provide them. Are we still on for lunch tomorrow?" "Absolutely." "Good. Sleep well, Claire." She set down her phone and looked at the drawing on her fridge, at the 3 stick figures holding hands, at the word family written in a child's careful letters. 3 weeks ago, she'd been sitting in her office alone drinking cold coffee and watching Marcus through a glass wall. Now she was here, in her kitchen, looking at a drawing from a 7-year-old who had decided to trust her, planning lunch with a man who had loved her for 3 years and finally had the chance to show it. It wasn't perfect. She was still terrified of messing up, still worried about being good enough for Emma, for Marcus, for this new life she was building. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Claire wasn't alone. Monday morning, Claire arrived at her office to find a paper cup on her desk. Still hot. The lid had a small heart drawn on it in marker. She picked it up and took a sip. Perfect. 2 sugars, splash of cream. Through the glass wall, Marcus was at his desk already on a call. He glanced up, caught her eye, and smiled. Claire smiled back. Then she lifted the cup slightly, a small acknowledgement, a thank you. Marcus nodded once and returned to his call. Claire sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. The Q4 report needed final review. The board meeting was in 3 days. She had a dozen emails waiting for responses. But for just a moment she let herself sit there, holding the coffee Marcus had made her, looking at the photo on her desk that hadn't been there last week. Marcus and Emma at the park, both of them laughing at something off camera. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma sent from Diane's phone. "Did you put my drawing on your fridge?" Claire took a photo of her refrigerator and sent it back. "Right here, where I can see it every day." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Good, because you're part of my family now." Claire stared at the message until her vision blurred. Another text came through, this time from Marcus. "Everything okay?" She wiped her eyes and typed back, "Everything's perfect." And for the first time in 3 years, she meant it. Claire took another sip of coffee and got to work.